The first thing you may feel tonight is a gentle curiosity, the kind that settles softly on your mind like a warm blanket, inviting you to relax, get sleepy, and drift with the quiet rhythm of a crackling fire. As you sink into that calm, let us slowly step toward a moment in medieval life, a moment when the air itself subtly changed, guiding villagers to prepare for whatever nature was shaping next. Before we go further, may I ask where you're listening from, and what time it is there? If you enjoy calm historical journeys like this, before we continue, feel free to tap like, subscribe, and leave a comment to help this small channel grow. Now, let your shoulders soften a little more as we begin. When the air first shifted in a medieval village, it wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was a colder breeze slipping between the wooden beams. Sometimes it was a stillness that settled over the fields. People who lived close to nature understood these tiny clues in a quiet, instinctive way, trusting that the one who controlled the winds and the seasons guided every change around them. Villagers noticed the way chickens paused in their pecking or how the sheep gathered closer together. These small behaviors carried meaning, and even if no one explained them aloud, everyone felt it in the same steady way. Something was beginning. And that beginning often came with its own sense of calm preparation rather than panic. As daylight softened into grey, mothers would tighten their cloaks and step outside for a moment, feeling the chilled air brush across their skin. It wasn't frightening. It was simply informative, a whisper from the world saying that a shift in the season or weather might soon arrive. This gentle awareness shaped their daily rhythm. Children, with their bare feet dusted in earth, would pause their play and glance toward the horizon, noticing how the color of the sky felt different. Even without words, they sensed the atmosphere changing, and they tended to mirror the adults, quiet, observant, and patient. It was part of growing up in a place where nature's voice mattered deeply. A soft reminder for you here, as your mind drifts, breathe slowly. You're safe, you're warm, and you're allowed to let your thoughts loosen while we continue our quiet walk through history. Inside the wooden houses, the scent of packed earth floors and dry straw carried hints of the coming change. Sometimes the wind slipped through the smallest cracks, bringing early warnings. Women would place their hands near the edges of the doorframe to feel how strong the draft was, then make small notes in their minds about what might need adjustment later. For the men returning from the fields, the soil told its own story. If the ground felt too soft under their boots or grew unusually dry, they understood that the next few days might bring heavy rain or an unexpected shift in temperature. Their connection to the land was not mystical. It was experience passed down through generations. Neighbors sometimes exchanged short, almost whispered observations. A simple line like "the air is different today" carried far more meaning than it sounded. It meant that the village, in its own quiet way, would begin to prepare. This preparation was not born from fear but from responsibility and wisdom. As evening approached, cooking fires flickered gently, sending warm light across the inside of each home. While simple meals simmered, families shared what they noticed. Not dramatic warnings, just gentle confirmations. Yes, I felt it too. These quiet moments stitched the community together. Another soft anchor for your attention. If your mind wanders, let it. You can return to the story whenever you wish. Nothing here requires effort. Just drift with the calm. By nightfall, the entire village seemed to move with a slower rhythm. People kept their ears open for changes in the wind, for the distant sound of branches shifting, or for the silence that seemed slightly heavier. This attentiveness was a kind of protection, steady, peaceful, and rooted in trust that every shift in nature carried purpose. Sometimes a thick mist rolled through the fields earlier than usual. When that happened, villagers walked home just a little faster, lanterns swaying softly in their hands. The glow of each lantern guided their steps, a simple tool made useful by the will of the one who made light and darkness alike. Inside the homes, children were tucked into straw-stuffed mattresses, listening to the sounds of the night. The rhythmic creaking of wooden walls, the soft whistling of wind, and the fading voices of neighbors settling in created a soundscape that felt both ancient and comforting. This was how they learned to rest even when the world shifted slightly outside. Adults sat near the hearth, warming their hands as they spoke in low tones. They didn't worry loudly. Instead, They acknowledged the change in the air with reflections like, "Looks like the season might turn early." These conversations created ease, not stress, and guided the gentle steps of preparation that would follow. And as the fire crackled softly, the village settled deeper into the night, held in a calm awareness that tomorrow might bring something new. But for now, they rested, trusting in their routines, their experience, and the quiet guidance of nature that had shaped their lives for generations. By the time dawn returned, a colder quiet often settled over the village. People stepped outside their homes with slow, steady movements, letting the morning air brush across their faces. In these early moments, they confirmed what they had sensed the night before: the world was changing again. Not in a dramatic way, but in a way that asked them to pay attention, gently and responsibly. Throughout the morning, families went about their chores with a subtle shift in pace. There was an extra glance toward the sky, an extra moment spent listening to the distant trees, an extra thought about what tasks should be finished before evening. Even routine actions, like feeding the animals or sweeping the yard, carried a quiet alertness. When villagers gathered near the well, they traded small observations while drawing water. Someone might mention the stillness of the birds. Someone else might note the hardness of the ground. These comments were casual but meaningful, forming a shared understanding that the community might need to adjust its plans soon. A soft reminder for you as you listen: check in with your breath again. Let your shoulders drop just a little more. You're not in a rush. This story is meant to hold you gently. Animals also sensed the shift. Horses flicked their ears more often. Goats became unusually quiet. Dogs stayed close to their owners, watching the world with alert but calm eyes. Villagers trusted these reactions, not as superstition, but as practical signs from creatures created with instincts that humans sometimes overlooked. As midday approached, the light seemed to sit differently on the fields, casting longer shadows even when the sun was high. The air carried a slight weight, the kind that hinted at approaching rain or a change in temperature. Farmers, leaning on their tools, paused in their work to examine the horizon, measuring distance with the familiarity built from years under the open sky. Inside the homes, women evaluated their supplies quietly. They ran their hands over sacks of grain, tested how much dried food remained, and checked whether the hearth needed fresh kindling. These weren't acts of fear, they were gentle movements of readiness, shaped by the understanding that preparation was a blessing granted by the one who allowed them to notice the signs. As the afternoon passed, the wind shifted direction, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. That scent alone could guide decisions, whether to repair a roof before nightfall, whether to bring animals inside earlier, or whether to send children home sooner from gathering firewood at the forest's edge. Another soft anchor here: if your attention drifts, it's perfectly fine. This is your quiet space. Let the rhythm of the story settle you as we move slowly forward. In the village square, people gathered briefly to discuss the coming days. No formal meeting, no panic, just a circle of familiar faces speaking calmly about what they expected. They didn't need elaborate plans. Their shared knowledge and cooperation formed a natural safety net. As shadows grew longer once more, the village began settling into an evening rhythm again. Doors were gently secured. Tools were brought inside. The last buckets of water were drawn. The final signs of daylight slid across the rooftops, reminding everyone to finish the small tasks that made nights easier. Children, sensing the seriousness without feeling afraid, stayed closer to home. They watched adults move with purpose and learned through observation what it meant to live with awareness and gratitude for the guidance nature provided. Inside each home, the glow of the hearth returned, casting warm shapes on the walls. Families spoke about what they would do if the weather turned. Their voices stayed soft, even soothing, blending with the steady crackle of firewood. These conversations were small threads that kept the household connected. As night rose again, the same shifting air that started all of this drifted through the village once more. But now, the people were ready, calm, thoughtful, and supported by one another. They had noticed the signs, acknowledged them, and taken gentle steps toward safety. And in that slow, quiet night, as lanterns dimmed and the wind whispered along the rooftops, The village finally rested in peaceful readiness, trusting in their efforts and in the one who shaped the world around them, knowing that whatever came next, they would meet it with steadiness and care. When the first signs of shifting weather settled into the village, one of the earliest responses was a gentle, methodical gathering of supplies. Nothing loud, nothing rushed, just a quiet acceptance that the coming days might demand preparation. People moved through their routines with steady hands, understanding that readiness began not with fear, but with small, consistent actions that supported their households. In the cool dimness of early morning, families stepped into their storage spaces to check what remained from previous seasons. Clay jars were lifted, grain bags pressed lightly to feel their weight, and bundles of dried herbs examined for freshness. The air inside these storerooms carried a dusty scent, mixed with the faint aroma of dried vegetables and wood. Each item was a reminder of how past efforts supported the present, granted through the will of the Almighty who allowed resources to grow and be harvested. Outside, the fields held the soft hush of anticipation. Farmers took short breaks from their work to evaluate how much barley, rye, or oats could be milled before the weather shifted. They didn't debate or argue, they simply adjusted. Their awareness came from years of living closely with the land, watching its cycles change, and trusting the knowledge handed down from their parents and grandparents. Women spent part of the day collecting dried peas, beans, and root vegetables, stacking them neatly in baskets lined with straw. They tied each basket carefully, making sure the contents would last through colder nights. There was beauty in the routine, the brushing sound of straw, the hollow thump of wooden lids, the quiet intention behind every movement. These were tasks done for survival, but they also brought a sense of calm control. A soft reminder for your drifting mind, you don't need to focus intensely. Let each detail pass like a slow breeze. This story is meant to relax you, not challenge you. In the marketplace, villagers traded gently for what they lacked. A handful of lentils exchanged for a small jar of honey, or a slab of dried fish traded for a cloth pouch of salt. These exchanges weren't hurried or competitive. Each trade held mutual respect, recognizing that community cooperation was stronger than individual worry. People didn't hoard, they balanced what they had with what others needed. Children often helped by sorting small items, nuts collected from the forest, sticks for kindling, or dried apples stored after last season's harvest. Their hands were small but precise, and their quiet excitement softened the seriousness of preparation. They learned responsibility through participation, watching their elders with admiration and understanding that these actions protected the household. Inside the homes, tools were inspected for wear. Wooden bowls were checked for cracks, lids tightened on clay pots, and ropes examined for fraying. Even simple objects mattered. A well-tied rope could secure food from animals. A perfectly sealed jar could keep grain fresh longer. Every small detail contributed to their resilience. As the day stretched on, the sun cast warm light across the village, illuminating baskets of newly gathered supplies. The glow carried a sense of reassurance. Preparedness didn't eliminate difficulty, but it softened its impact. Villagers understood this intimately, shaping their efforts with quiet hope rather than anxiety. Another gentle attention anchor for you. If your thoughts wander, let them. This slow rhythm is intentional, designed to lull the mind into restfulness as we continue. The gathering continued into the afternoon, where the scent of dry wood and stored grain mingled in the warm air. People took turns lifting heavy sacks, adjusting their shelves, and ensuring everything stayed accessible for the days ahead. Cooperation flowed naturally, one neighbor helping another without prompting, a shared understanding that safety grew stronger through unity. Women tied bundles of mint, chamomile, and other herbs used for calming meals or easing discomfort during harsh nights. Hanging them near the hearth allowed the heat to dry them further, filling the home with a comforting aroma that hinted at both nourishment and care. Men prepared firewood carefully, choosing the driest logs they had. Each piece was stacked neatly, forming rows that would survive the cold with ease. They knew that warmth came through both effort and the will of the one who allowed trees to grow. Their hands worked with purpose, carrying memories of winters past and expectations of winters to come. Children, sensing the importance of the day, often carried small arms full of kindling from place to place. Their laughter softened the heaviness around them, creating a balance between focus and innocence. Even their footsteps, light, hurried, playful, seemed to weave a gentler energy through the task at hand. As evening neared, the village collectively paused. They stood back and observed their efforts, the full baskets, the stacked wood, the sealed jars, the tied bundles. A calm satisfaction washed through the homes. No matter what the coming days held, they had prepared with sincerity and trust, ready to face change with steady hearts. As nighttime crept closer, villagers shifted into a slower rhythm, storing the last of the day's work with gentle care. The final baskets were placed on high shelves, and lids were tightened with deliberate, quiet movements. The scent of dried vegetables, herbs, and wood smoke lingered in every corner, carrying the feeling of readiness throughout each home. Nothing felt rushed. Preparation was a steady ritual shaped by experience and trust. The hearth played its usual role, glowing warmly as families gathered around it. Light flickered across the walls, reflecting off clay pots and woven baskets. People reviewed the supplies in their minds, making simple notes about what needed replenishing tomorrow. Their planning wasn't complicated. It was rooted in patience. They believed that thoughtful steps, combined with the will of the Almighty, would guide them through any uncertainty. A gentle reminder for you: let your breathing slow again. If your mind floats away, it's perfectly fine. These quiet images are here to soothe you, not hold your attention tightly. Outside, the wind whispered across rooftops, carrying hints of the next day's weather. Some villagers stepped out for a moment, closing their cloaks around their shoulders as they inhaled the cool air. They could feel nature preparing something. Whether it would be rain, cold, or wind didn't matter as much as the simple understanding that preparedness brought peace. Before returning indoors, they glanced at the wood piles, the tools placed under cover, and the grain jars sealed for the night. These small confirmations eased their minds. They didn't need perfection, they only needed consistency. The village survived year after year because they embraced these steady actions together. Inside, women placed the final touches on their storage spaces, hanging herbs a bit higher, adjusting cloth covers over baskets, and placing stones near lids to keep them tightly closed. Their hands moved with a comforting familiarity, shaped by seasons that had taught them how to care for their homes with both strength and gentleness. Children, now sleepy, often peeked into the storage corners, admiring the piles of food, dried goods, and wood. To them, it felt like treasure, a sign that their family was safe and that tomorrow would come with calm reassurance. Their parents' preparation quietly shaped the way they understood security and gratitude. Men talked softly near the doorway, discussing tomorrow's tasks. Maybe a roof to fix, a fence to reinforce, or more wood to gather before the weather changed further. They didn't make long speeches, just straightforward plans spoken with calm practicality. Their focus remained on what they could do, trusting the outcome to the one who controlled the seasons. Another soft anchor for you. Notice how your body feels supported right now. You are simply listening, drifting, sinking into stillness. The story will hold you. As the night deepened, lanterns dimmed one by one. The quiet inside each home grew thicker, settling like a warm blanket over wooden floors and straw-filled bedding. The village felt smaller, safer, as families drew closer together within their homes. The supplies they had prepared earlier in the day offered a comforting presence, filling the room with a sense of quiet abundance. Some villagers used the late hours to mend bags or reinforce basket handles. These were slow, peaceful tasks done while sitting near the hearth, the faint crackle of fire providing a gentle rhythm. Even in the dim light, their movements remained steady and purposeful. Outside, the village paths fell silent except for the distant rustling of leaves. The calm night allowed villagers to rest, knowing their efforts had shaped a buffer between themselves and whatever nature might bring. Their hearts eased into a gentle state of trust in their labor and trust in the Almighty who allowed the land to provide. By the time the last embers glowed softly in the hearth, most families were already lying under their blankets, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a prepared home. Their minds drifted into sleep with the knowledge that they had done what was needed for the day. No drama, no urgency, just steady readiness. And in that peaceful darkness, the gathered supplies, carefully collected, sorted, and stored, stood as silent companions to the village. They would wait patiently through the night, offering comfort through their simple presence, ready to support the days still unfolding under the watchful guidance of the one who shaped every season. When the first hints of strong weather drifted into the village, the homes themselves became the next focus of calm preparation. These houses, built from wood, earth, and thatch, were simple but deeply familiar to the people who lived in them. Strengthening them wasn't a moment of panic. It was a practiced ritual, shaped by years of understanding how wind moved across rooftops and how walls responded to changing seasons. Early in the morning, villagers stepped outside and walked slow circles around their homes. They looked for gaps in the wooden boards, listened for loose roof pieces shifting in a breeze, and examined the places where mud plaster had begun to crack. Each detail mattered. A well-maintained home was a blessing, a shelter made useful through effort granted by the Almighty who allowed the materials to exist. Men and women often worked side by side during this time. One might hold a basket of tools while the other pressed thick layers of mud mixed with straw into the cracks. The mixture was cool to the touch, sticky and heavy, leaving their hands speckled with bits of hay. They worked patiently, smoothing each patch until the wall felt sturdy again. The rooftops required special attention. Thatch, though lightweight, could easily loosen with strong wind. Villagers checked the ropes that held the bundles together, tugging them gently and tightening knots that had weakened. The sound of ropes sliding through wooden pegs carried softly through the air, blending with distant birdsong as the village prepared in its own quiet harmony. A soft reminder for your drifting thoughts: let the pace slow even more. You don't need to picture everything perfectly. Just feel the gentleness of the scene guiding you toward rest. Some villagers climbed onto low roofs to adjust the thatch by hand. They used wooden rakes to pull the layers downward, smoothing them like blankets over the beams. Even the smallest adjustment helped the roof hold firm against future storms. From above, the village looked peaceful, smoke rising from a few chimneys, rooftops forming uneven lines against the sky, and people moving with steady purpose. Inside the homes, children gathered pebbles and small branches used to reinforce the edges of thatch bundles. Their part might have been small, but it mattered. They felt proud of it. Their laughter mixed with the soft thumping of adults pressing mud into walls, creating a gentle soundtrack of communal care. Women often took this time to reinforce the door frames. A loose hinge or a weak latch could invite cold air or rain inside. They added wooden wedges, tightened bindings, and sometimes even hung thick cloth near the entrance to block drafts. The cloth carried the sweet scent of herbs stored nearby, giving the doorway a comforting aroma. As midday warmth settled over the village, people paused to observe their progress. Those with more fragile homes often received help from neighbors. There was no hesitation. A sturdier house meant one less worry for everyone. The harmony of these shared efforts created a sense of collective security, a quiet reassurance that they faced nature's challenges together. Another gentle anchor for you: notice how your breaths naturally deepen when the rhythm slows. That's the intention. Let yourself be carried by the calm. After a short rest, repairs resumed. Some villagers secured loose shutters with wooden pins, ensuring that loud winds wouldn't slam them open during the night. Others reinforced the corners of their homes with extra beams, driving stakes deeper into the ground to prevent shifting in the soil. The ground itself offered clues. If earth near the walls felt too soft, more stones were moved against it to prevent erosion from rain. If the soil dried and cracked, villagers added damp earth to stabilize the foundation. These small corrections helped the homes last through seasons of unpredictable weather. The hearth area received attention next. People checked the chimneys for blockages, clearing out soot to ensure that smoke could rise freely once the storms arrived. A well-functioning hearth kept families warm and safe. They treated it with care, knowing its warmth was a gift provided through both effort and the will of the one who created fire's usefulness. Children often peeked through windows, watching adults move from task to task. Their eyes traced the patterns of reinforcement. Ropes knotted, beams lifted, thatch tightened, and stored the memories for the future. These moments taught them quiet resilience, the kind that didn't require dramatic speeches or fear, only steady, mindful action. As the afternoon breeze grew stronger, villagers noticed how the repaired walls and rooftops responded. The homes held firm, no longer quivering at the edges. A sense of comfort settled over the village. Preparation brought stability, and stability brought peace. By late afternoon, the light softened, giving everything a warm, earthy glow. People stepped back to admire their work. The home stood quietly, strengthened by careful hands and thoughtful eyes, ready to face whatever the wind carried next. It wasn't perfection they sought, only readiness, and readiness had been achieved through calm, steady effort. As the sun began its slow descent, villagers shifted into quieter movements, giving attention to the smaller details that held their homes together. These final touches were often the most meaningful, not because they were dramatic, but because they reflected the calm intention behind every part of the preparation. There was comfort in knowing that even the softest breeze had been considered, and every corner reinforced with care. In many homes, the evening routine included checking the beams that supported the roof. People pressed their palms gently against the wood, feeling for any give or looseness. If a beam seemed unsteady, they added stones or wooden wedges beneath it. These adjustments were simple, but they made the structure stronger, preserving warmth and stability through nights of unpredictable wind. A gentle reminder for your drifting thoughts. If your mind wanders, let it drift like a leaf carried by a slow breeze. There's no need to follow every detail. The rhythm itself is enough to help you relax further. Beyond the homes, fences also needed attention. A weak fence could allow livestock to wander during strong winds, so villagers walked the perimeter of their yards, pressing posts deeper into the soil and reinforcing them with horizontal beams. These quiet acts of responsibility protected both animals and families, weaving together threads of safety that stretched across the whole village. Inside the houses, the sound of quiet repairs lingered. Wooden pegs tapped into place. Cloths were hung over drafty corners. Bulky stones were positioned at the base of doors to keep them from shifting in the wind. These layers of protection weren't extravagant. They were built from everyday materials, used wisely and with gratitude for the resources provided to them. Children often observed these tasks with sleepy interest, leaning their heads against the walls or sitting cross-legged near the hearth. They didn't always understand every technique, but they absorbed the feeling of careful preparation, the steady pace, the unspoken understanding that safety came from both effort and trust in the Almighty who guided their hands. As night approached, lanterns began to glow in windows, warm circles of light softening the darkening paths outside. The village looked peaceful, almost wrapped in its own stillness. The homes, now strengthened and secured, carried a quiet dignity. They had stood through many seasons, and with each repair, they were ready to stand through more. Another gentle anchor for your attention. Breathe slowly, allowing your chest to rise and fall without urgency. Let the calm of the story settle around you like a blanket. Indoors, families gathered for simple conversations about the next steps. Should they bring animals into shelter earlier tomorrow? Should they store extra water? Their questions were practical and calm. There was no fear in their planning, only a thoughtful awareness of what nature sometimes asks from them. As the fire in the hearth glowed brighter, the warmth reached every corner of the room. People sat close to it, resting their hands on their knees, feeling the comfort seep into their bones. The repairs done throughout the day now faded into the background, replaced by the satisfying quiet of a home that felt solid and secure. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, brushing against the newly reinforced walls. Instead of rattling, the homes held with steady confidence. The thatch lay flush against the roof, the beams stood firm, and the doors stayed closed without trembling. It was a peaceful confirmation that their efforts had made a difference. In the final moments before sleep, villagers offered their minds to rest. They let go of the day's work, trusting that they had done everything within their ability. Their homes stood beside them as silent guardians, strengthened through their labor, ready to weather whatever the approaching night or coming days would bring. And so, Under the dim lantern light and the soft hush of wind, the village drifted into stillness. Each home, reinforced with care and gratitude, became a haven against uncertainty, quiet, sturdy, and filled with the gentle assurance that calm preparation had wrapped every family in a sense of safety and peace. In every medieval home, the hearth was more than a place for cooking. It was the heart of warmth, light, and comfort during long, uncertain nights. When signs of harsher weather loomed, villagers instinctively turned their attention toward it. Preparing the hearth wasn't dramatic. It was a calming ritual that steadied the mind. Each movement carried the same gentle intention, to protect the home with warmth granted through both effort and the will of the Almighty who made fire beneficial. The day often began with clearing old ash. Adults approached the hearth with slow, practiced motions, scooping away the grey remnants of yesterday's flames. The scent of cool charcoal mixed softly with the morning air. Removing old ash was like creating a clean slate, allowing the next fire to glow brighter, breathe easier, and warm the home more evenly. Fresh kindling was then gathered. Thin branches, dried twigs, and small splinters of wood were placed in neat bundles beside the hearth. Children often helped with this part, carrying tiny handfuls of sticks with quiet pride. Their footsteps echoed gently on the packed earth floors, adding a soft rhythm to the preparation. The crackle of these twigs would soon make promise comfort. Larger firewood followed. Men carried thick logs inside, stacking them carefully near the wall where drafts couldn't reach. Each log was chosen for dryness, weight, and the way it split. Firewood was valuable, not because of the wood itself, but because the one who created the trees allowed them to grow strong enough to give warmth when needed. Villagers never forgot that connection. A gentle reminder for you now: allow your breath to slow, as though you were sitting near that same warm hearth. You don't need to visualize everything perfectly. Just let the calm settle deeper into your body. As preparations continued, women often checked the clay hearthstones, ensuring none had cracked from previous fires. They touched the stones lightly, feeling for weaknesses. If a stone felt fragile, it was replaced or supported with packed earth. These careful adjustments protected the home from stray embers and kept heat flowing safely. Herbs hung nearby added subtle fragrance to the space. Bundles of mint, rosemary, or chamomile, used for both cooking and comfort, swayed gently whenever the door opened. Their scents mingled with the earthy aroma of wood, creating a space that felt warm even before the fire was lit. The iron tools of the hearth, the poker, the shovel, the ash hook, were inspected next. Villagers wiped away dust and tested each handle to ensure it held firm. These tools never needed to be perfect, only reliable. With them, families tended their fires, adjusted burning logs, and kept the flames balanced through long nights. In the early afternoon, children were often tasked with gathering armfuls of straw for fire-starting mats. They spread the straw neatly, weaving it loosely by hand. The soft rustling sound filled the home, a gentle reminder that even small tasks played a role in keeping the family warm. Another soft anchor for your attention. If your mind drifts away from the details, let it drift. This slow rhythm is meant to cradle your thoughts, not hold them tightly. As the sunlight shifted toward evening, families placed everything they needed for the night within arm's reach. Firewood in stacks, fresh twigs beside them, herbs hung overhead, and hearth tools positioned neatly. These small acts turned the hearth into a sanctuary of warmth, a quiet promise that the night ahead would be more comfortable. Some villagers prepared warm stones to place near bedding later. They heated the stones lightly by the fire before wrapping them in cloth. These stones held heat through the night, offering gentle warmth for children and elders when temperatures dropped suddenly. Inside the home, the shadows deepened as the day faded. The hearth became the central point of focus, its unlit space waiting patiently. People often paused in front of it, appreciating the preparations they had made. The hearth stood as a symbol of resilience, shaped by human effort and supported by the natural elements provided to them. As the first spark finally touched the kindling, the hearth awoke with a soft crackle. Flames curled upward slowly, touching the logs with glowing orange edges. The warmth spread gently through the room, carrying a sense of safety. It wasn't just heat, it was reassurance, a soft and steady reminder that they were ready for the long night ahead. And as the fire grew stronger, sending flickering light across the walls, the home settled into its calm evening rhythm. The hearth, now carefully prepared, became the quiet guardian of the night, its glow offering peace to every person gathered around it. As the fire settled into a steady glow, villagers took a final look around their homes to ensure everything near the hearth was safe and orderly. They checked the distance of wooden tools from the flames, adjusted the stones that framed the fire, and smoothed the straw mats to prevent stray embers from catching. These small actions weren't rushed. They were carried out with a protective calm that filled the room with quiet certainty. The rising warmth reached the corners of the home, softening the air. Shadows danced gently along the wooden beams, creating patterns that children watched with growing drowsiness. The hum of the fire, low and rhythmic, felt like a familiar lullaby passed down through time. Its light flickered against clay jars and woven baskets, turning simple objects into comforting silhouettes. A soft reminder here for your drifting mind. You don't need to follow every detail closely. Let the warmth of the scene settle around you like a blanket, inviting you deeper into rest. As families gathered near the hearth, evening tasks shifted into slow motions. Bread dough was placed near the fire to rise, small cloth bundles of herbs warmed to release their scent, and kettles of water were set gently on stones to heat for nighttime meals. The scent of simmering broth often filled the air, carrying the promise of nourishment and ease. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the walls. Instead of stirring worry, it simply confirmed that the work done earlier had meaning. Strengthened homes and a carefully prepared hearth formed a shield that eased the mind. Villagers listened to the sounds with a kind of quiet acceptance, trusting the structure around them. Men sat closer to the fire to mend rope or clean tools. Their movements were slow, almost meditative. Women stirred the simmering pots or folded cloths to place near the bedding ladder. Children, lulled by the warm air, leaned against one another or rested their heads in a parent's lap, their eyelids heavy with sleep. As the night deepened, the fire's glow softened into amber hues. The hearth continued its steady crackle, never shouting, never raging, just glowing gently like a steady heart within the home. People often paused to watch the flames, letting their thoughts drift silently. The warmth and sound worked together to ease any leftover tension from the day. Another gentle anchor for you. Breathe deeply and let your shoulders soften again. You are not required to analyze anything here. Just drift with the rhythm. When meals were ready, bowls were filled and placed near the hearth where families ate quietly. The warmth made every bite more comforting. These meals were simple, soups, grains, or roasted roots, but they carried the feeling of being protected from the outside cold. After eating, families cleaned with slow, unhurried motions. Ash from the fire was arranged neatly, tools were placed back in their proper spots, and the remaining firewood was set close enough for easy access during the night. These preparations ensured the fire could be tended quietly without disturbing sleeping children. As the final tasks were completed, the home dimmed further, lit only by the soft glow of the hearth. Blankets were laid out, straw bedding fluffed, and warm stones placed carefully at the edges to hold the heat until morning. The home felt full, not just with objects, but with peace shaped by thoughtful hands. Outside, the wind continued to whisper, but the inside space held steady. People settled down one by one, listening to the comforting crackle beside them. The hearth's glow painted long, slow-moving shadows that stretched and softened with every flicker. In these closing moments of the evening, villagers rested with a deep sense of trust. They had prepared their hearth with care, strengthened their homes, and gathered enough warmth to face whatever the night carried. There was no need for worry, only quiet gratitude for the blessings that allowed them to work, prepare, and find comfort in the heart of their home. And so, wrapped in the gentle warmth of the fire, the village drifted into the softness of night. The hearth continued its slow-breathing glow, a calm guardian offering light and warmth until morning returned. When signs of shifting weather appeared, one of the most important responsibilities in a medieval village was caring for the animals. Livestock weren't just creatures wandering in the yard. They were essential companions that provided milk, wool, strength for field work, and warmth for the community. Preparing for harsh nights began with simple, steady plans, carried out with tenderness and gratitude toward the one who allowed these animals to bring benefit. In the early morning, villagers visited their barns and pens to observe each animal's behavior. Cows that usually grazed calmly might stand closer together, and goats sometimes grew quieter, watching the sky with keen eyes. These shifts mattered. People trusted these instincts, not as superstition, but as natural signs created with purpose. Families began by checking the barns. They examined the wooden walls for gaps where cold wind could slip inside. If they found any, they pressed mud and straw into the spaces, smoothing the mixture until it formed a thick, insulating seal. The scent of damp earth mixed with the smell of hay, creating a feeling of groundedness that made the work peaceful. Stalls were cleaned next. Fresh straw was spread generously across the floor, creating a soft, warm bedding for the animals. The rustle of straw echoed gently through the barn as children carried armfuls of it from one corner to another. These preparations turned the barn into a refuge against the cold. A soft reminder for you: let your breathing slow, just like the steady rhythm of villagers working with care. You're not required to focus sharply, just drift with the calm atmosphere. Some villagers inspected the wooden gates and hinges. A loose latch could open during a windy night, allowing animals to wander into dangerous conditions. They added new rope bindings, reinforced beams, and pressed stones against the bottom edges of doors to keep them from shifting when strong gusts blew across the village. Water troughs were also prepared. In colder seasons, water could freeze quickly, making it difficult for animals to drink. Villagers placed the troughs closer to the barn walls or covered them with wooden planks that slowed the chill. Some even warmed small stones to drop into the water, helping maintain a usable temperature for a little while. As the sun climbed higher, families moved together with quiet efficiency. Mothers brushed the coats of sheep and goats, removing excess dirt and smoothing tangled wool. Children checked the feed, carrying small buckets of grain and placing them neatly inside feeding bowls. Fathers repaired fences, replacing weak posts and tightening rope nets that kept animals from wandering. The animals themselves sensed the care being given. Cows leaned into brushing hands, offering soft, rhythmic breaths. Horses flicked their tails with contentment. Chickens gathered closer to the barn doorway where the sunlight pooled, warming their feathers. These small behaviors reassured villagers that the animals felt safe and tended to. Another gentle anchor: if your thoughts drift somewhere else, that's perfectly fine. Let the calmness of these small barn sounds hold your attention softly. Throughout the afternoon, villagers prepared extra feed for the coming days. They tied bundles of dried grass, filled sacks with grain, and set aside crates of stored vegetables that the animals could eat during storms. Having enough food within reach meant no one would need to venture far in dangerous conditions. Some families crafted makeshift windbreaks from woven branches. These structures were placed just outside the barn to soften the force of the wind before it reached the animal shelter. The branches rustled softly when touched by the breeze, creating a natural barrier that blended into the landscape. Inside the barn, lantern hooks were checked and repaired. During harsh nights, a single lantern offered just enough light to tend to the animals without disturbing their rest. The warm glow created a sense of peace in the dim space, illuminating the gentle rising and falling of breath from cows, goats, or horses. As evening approached, the barns felt like extensions of the homes, warm, cared for, and ready to protect whatever lived within. The animals settled into their freshly prepared spaces, rustling the straw beneath them with soft movements. Their presence added a grounding calm to the village. Villagers stepped back and observed their work with quiet satisfaction. Strengthening walls, preparing feed, checking water, all of it contributed to the safety of their companions. These efforts were not burdens but responsibilities accepted with sincerity, recognizing the blessings animals brought to daily life. And as the sky dimmed, casting long shadows across the barns, the village felt more prepared. The livestock rested, the shelters stood ready, and the people walked home with steady hearts, confident that they had done everything possible to protect their animals from the approaching night. As the evening deepened, villagers returned to the barns for one final round of quiet inspection. This was not a noisy or hurried moment. It was the last gentle sweep to make sure everything was in place for the night. They moved with soft steps, carrying small lanterns that cast warm circles of light across the hay-strewn floors. Inside the stalls, the animals shifted peacefully. The cows' slow breaths created a calm rhythm, and the soft snorts from the horses blended with the rustle of straw. These sounds reassured the villagers that their companions were settling in well. Every movement echoed with a sense of connection, reminding the families why these preparations mattered so deeply. Feeding troughs were filled one more time, allowing animals to eat before the colder hours arrived. Grain poured with a soft hiss, and the animals responded with gentle nudges or quiet munching. Watching them eat gave the villagers a sense of comfort, proof that the creatures under their care felt safe and content. A gentle reminder for you: if your thoughts begin to float away, let them drift lightly. These scenes are meant to cradle your mind, not demand attention. Outside the barn doors, villagers checked the ropes and wooden latches again. They added a final knot here, tightened a beam there. The outdoor windbreaks, woven from bent branches, rustled softly in the growing wind, offering protection even in their simplicity. Each detail strengthened the animal's shelter against the night. Inside, families placed extra straw in the corners where younger animals slept. The added bedding held warmth longer, softening the chill that sometimes seeped in during the late hours. The younger goats or calves nestled into it with small, contented sighs, their tiny movements making the lantern light dance across the walls. Some villagers carried warm stones wrapped in cloth, placing them near the animals' bedding. These stones held heat from the hearth and released it slowly through the night. It was a small gesture, but it kept newborn or weaker animals from shivering during sudden drops in temperature. Another soft anchor for your attention. Imagine the warmth spreading gently, just like the comfort of a well-prepared home. There's no need to hold on to every detail. Simply follow the calm. The sounds of the barn shifted as night approached. The animals quieted, their movements slower and more rhythmic. Even the chickens tucked their heads beneath their wings, forming soft, round shapes on their roosts. The barn felt like a living space breathing in unison. Villagers often paused at the doorway, lantern in hand, to take in the peaceful sight. It was reassuring to see that the day's work had created such stability. Some whispered soft words of gratitude, recognizing that the ability to care for these creatures was a blessing in itself. As lanterns were finally lowered, the warm glow faded little by little. Only the faintest orange flicker clung to the barn walls before settling into darkness. Outside, the wind began to rise in long, slow waves, but the barn stood firm, strengthened by thoughtful hands and gentle planning. Families walked back toward their homes, their path lit by small lantern flames. Even in the gathering cold, they felt warmth in knowing that their animals were safe behind sturdy walls, resting on clean straw, fed, sheltered, and protected through both effort and the guidance of the Almighty who provided for all living things. In the quiet space between the barns and their homes, villagers listened to the night for a final moment. The wind rustled, the trees whispered, and somewhere in the distance a cow gave a soft, low call, not distressed, just settling comfortably. It was enough to ease every lingering worry. And as the villagers stepped inside their homes and closed their doors against the night, they carried with them the comforting knowledge that the livestock was secure. Their gentle plans, thoughtful actions, and steady hearts had wrapped the animals in safety, allowing all of them, humans and creatures alike, to face the coming night with peace. In medieval villages, preparing for difficult weather or uncertain days was never an entirely individual effort. People naturally watched over one another, offering help in gentle, unspoken ways. It wasn't a grand display, and no one announced their kindness. It was simply woven into daily life, a quiet understanding that safety grew stronger when shared. As the first hints of harsh weather approached, neighbors stepped outside and glanced toward one another's homes. A lifted hand, a nod, or a soft greeting was often enough to say, "I'm here if you need me." These small gestures carried a warmth that matched the glow of the hearths inside their homes, reminding everyone that they weren't facing the seasons alone. Many villagers began their day by assessing not only their own needs but also observing who around them could use an extra pair of hands. An older neighbor's fence leaning at an angle. A mother struggling to gather enough wood while tending to her children. A young family whose roof sagged in one corner. The signs were all visible to those who paid attention. The atmosphere carried a quiet rhythm of cooperation. People walked from home to home with steady footsteps, offering help without formality. Someone might pick up a bundle of wood and place it near a neighbor's door. Another might tighten a rope holding a thatched roof in place. The tasks were small but significant, strengthening the entire village as gently as sunlight strengthens morning mist. A soft reminder for you: let your breath loosen, just as the villagers loosen their worries by sharing the load with one another. You can relax deeper with every moment. Inside the village square, people exchanged simple observations. Your fence might need a new beam. I saw your goat shelter shifting in the wind. These were not criticisms but quiet notes of care. Advice came kindly, delivered with the hope of preventing trouble before it began. When families worked together, the sounds that filled the air became a soft, comforting echo of community. Wood being stacked, straw rustling as it was carried. Low conversations mixed with children's laughter as they moved between helping and playing. These sounds weren't clutter. They were like the heartbeat of the village, steady and reassuring. Sometimes villagers brought extra supplies to share. A spare handful of nails, a small roll of rope, a basket of dried beans harvested earlier in the season. These offerings were given with humility, never expecting anything in return. People knew that blessings were shared more meaningfully when given quietly, with the intention of easing another's burden. Another gentle anchor for your drifting thoughts. Imagine walking through a peaceful village path, the air cool, the atmosphere steady. You don't need to picture every detail. Just let the calm rest lightly on your mind. When a home needed more serious repairs, neighbors gathered naturally. A few men would lift beams, adjusting them until they stood firmly. Women might prepare warm drinks or simple meals to keep the workers energized. Children fetched small tools, proud to be included. It wasn't planned hours ahead. It simply happened when needed, as naturally as breathing. Sharing knowledge was just as important as sharing labor. An experienced farmer might teach a young neighbor how to secure a roof against strong gusts. Someone skilled with woodwork might show others how to build a sturdier fence. These lessons flowed quietly, spoken in soft tones while hands worked steadily. As the day stretched toward midday, small groups formed and dissolved as tasks were completed. A repaired door latch here, a reinforced window frame there. Each completed task added another layer of safety to the village, creating a ripple effect of comfort that spread far beyond the walls of any single home. People didn't keep count of the help they gave or received. They understood that life shifted constantly. Some days you had strength to offer, and other days you needed someone to steady your load. It was a cycle shaped by humility, gratitude, and the recognition that all assistance ultimately came through the opportunities and ability provided by the Almighty. In the quiet afternoon hours, villagers often paused to look around. The homes felt sturdier. The barns looked more secure. Children played safely, surrounded by adults working together. A peaceful satisfaction settled over the village, the kind that came from shared effort and quiet unity. As the breeze picked up, carrying the scent of distant rain, neighbors exchanged final glances of reassurance. They didn't need long conversations. A small nod was enough to say that everyone had done what they could, and that no one would face the weather alone when the night arrived. As afternoon faded into evening, the atmosphere of cooperation became even quieter and more natural. Villagers moved through the pathways with a calm sense of purpose, checking once more on the homes around them. They didn't announce their intentions or call attention to themselves. They simply followed the gentle instinct to ensure everyone was ready before nightfall settled over the village. Some neighbors stopped by each other's homes with a final bundle of straw or an extra piece of firewood. These gestures were small but meaningful. They created invisible threads of reassurance, letting others know that their comfort mattered. In a place where the weather could change quickly, these simple acts provided strength long before the storms ever arrived. The evening light softened the village into warm tones, casting long shadows on the ground. In that peaceful glow, villagers repaired the last weak spots they had noticed earlier. A crooked fence post was hammered gently back into place. A loose shutter was secured against the wall. These tasks didn't take long, but they carried a sense of shared responsibility that eased the heart. A gentle reminder for you now: breathe slowly and let the quiet image of neighbors helping one another settle into your thoughts. You're meant to rest with the rhythm of these scenes, not analyze them. Inside homes, families prepared warm drinks or small meals that they shared with those who had helped throughout the day. A simple bowl of broth, a few slices of warm bread, or a handful of dried fruit. It wasn't about the food itself, but the kindness behind offering it. These small gatherings near the hearth strengthened bonds without the need for celebration. Some neighbors stayed a little longer to help stack the final pieces of firewood or adjust the cloth hanging over drafty door frames. They spoke softly, exchanging practical tips about the coming weather. Their voices blended naturally with the crackling of nearby fires, creating a gentle harmony that wrapped the homes in calm. Outside, lanterns began to glow along the paths, guiding villagers as they completed their last rounds. The soft flicker of light made the village feel closer, as though every home was linked by a warm thread of cooperation. Walking these paths, people felt comfort in knowing that each lantern represented a family with whom they shared both labor and goodwill. Another gentle anchor for your drifting thoughts. Imagine the peaceful sound of footsteps on packed earth, slow and steady, carrying no urgency. Let your mind wander lightly through that calm evening setting. Before returning to their own homes, villagers paused at the edges of their neighbors' yards, listening for anything out of place: a loose board creaking, a gate tapping in the wind. If something felt unsteady, they fixed it without waiting for thanks. Their concern was quiet, sincere, and offered without expectation. Children observed all of this with wide, thoughtful eyes. They learned through these small acts what cooperation meant, not as a lesson spoken aloud, but as something lived gently and consistently. Watching adults help one another shaped their understanding of community far more deeply than words ever could. As darkness settled, the village grew softer. People returned to their own hearths, warmed not just by fire, but by the calm knowledge that the day's shared efforts had strengthened everyone's safety. The air outside grew cooler, but a kind of collective warmth replaced any worry. Inside, families settled down, some whispering short prayers of gratitude for the strength and unity they had witnessed. They knew that being part of a village meant being part of something bigger than themselves, a woven fabric of support, granted through ability, opportunity, and the quiet mercy of the Almighty who allowed their efforts to flourish. Outside, the wind picked up just enough to test the edges of the homes and fences, but the repairs held firm, strengthened by many hands. The village rested under the night sky with a sense of steady peace, knowing that when neighbors helped one another, gently, quietly, and without expectation, they built more than safety. They built comfort, resilience, and a kind of harmony that made even the coldest nights feel softer. And so the village exhaled into the darkness, wrapped in the simple truth that no one faced the coming weather alone. The unity they created would carry them through the night, warm as any fire, steady as any shelter. When signs of difficult weather gathered on the horizon, one of the most vital responsibilities in the village was safeguarding water. Clean water meant survival, warm meals, safe drinking, steady health, and villagers understood this deeply. Preparing it wasn't frantic or complicated. It was a calm routine shaped by wisdom passed quietly from one generation to the next, guided by the understanding that every benefit came through the will of the Almighty who allowed the wells and streams to provide. The day often began with villagers visiting the well. In the soft morning light, people approached slowly, listening for subtle changes. If the bucket rope creaked differently or the water seemed unusually still, they took it as a reminder to prepare early. The cool air around the well felt heavier when weather was shifting, and villagers trusted these small cues. Families examined the wooden cover that protected the well. A loose hinge or a cracked board could let dust, insects, or falling leaves slip inside. With steady hands, they reinforced the lid using rope, spare wood, or packed earth. The goal wasn't perfection but protection, keeping the water inside as clean as possible before storms or strong winds arrived. Beside the well, families filled clay jars and wooden buckets that would be stored inside their homes. They worked with slow, measured motions, taking care not to spill or mix clean water with dirt from the ground. The jars were placed in dark corners where the temperature stayed cool, preserving freshness for the coming days. A gentle reminder for you: let your breath loosen the same way the villagers loosened their worries once their jars were filled. Slow, unhurried, peaceful. After gathering the first round of water, some women dipped cloth into heated water and used it as a simple filter. They let the water drip slowly through the fabric into a clean vessel, catching bits of sand or leaves that sometimes slipped in. The filtered water gleamed slightly clearer in the sunlight, a small improvement that made a meaningful difference during long nights. In homes with more experience, villagers boiled some of their stored water over the hearth. The soft bubbling sound filled the room with comfort, creating a sense of readiness. Once cooled, the boiled water was stored in sealed jars, wrapped in cloth to keep dust away. These jars were placed near the hearth, where warmth protected them from growing too cold. Nearby, children carried smaller cups of water to fill shallow bowls for animals. They learned early that livestock needed clean water just as humans did. Even small creatures like chickens drank more safely when the water was refreshed and kept covered from falling debris. Throughout the village, people checked gutters or simple wooden channels that collected rainwater. Before storms, they cleared leaves and branches from these paths, ensuring that water flowed cleanly into barrels or stone basins. This extra supply could prove useful if the well became harder to access or if the weather turned severe. Another gentle anchor for your drifting mind: imagine the soft sound of water pouring into clay jars, steady and soothing. You don't need to hold every detail, just allow the rhythm to comfort you. Inside many homes, families placed cloth covers over their stored water jars. The cloth prevented dust from settling and kept insects from slipping inside. Each cover was tied neatly with thin rope or strips of linen, creating an organized arrangement that made the space feel carefully tended. Villagers who lived near small streams inspected them too. They walked the bank slowly, checking for fallen branches or cloudy patches that signaled disturbance upstream. If the water looked questionable, they simply filled more jars from the well instead, prioritizing safety without fuss or alarm. Some families stored additional water just in case. Clay pots were tucked beneath tables, behind doors, or beside the hearth. These hidden reserves offered quiet reassurance. Knowing they had enough water eased the mind, especially when harsh nights or unpredictable storms approached. Children often helped carry the final jars inside, taking small steps to avoid spilling. Their careful movements filled the home with soft sounds: the clink of clay, the shuffle of feet, the whispered reminders from adults guiding them gently. These moments taught them responsibility and appreciation for resources. As evening approached, villagers completed their water preparations, setting the last jars into their chosen spots. The homes felt more secure, each corner holding a quiet promise of safety. Clean water, stored with intention and care, served as a soft shield against the uncertainties outside. By the time the sky dimmed, people stepped back and observed their work. Every jar filled, every cloth cover tied, every barrel positioned. A soothing sense of readiness settled into their hearts. Whatever the night might bring, they had taken thoughtful steps to prepare, trusting the rest to the guidance of the Almighty who provided the means for their efforts. As the afternoon deepened toward evening, villagers stepped outside one last time to make sure every water source was protected. They moved slowly, lanterns in hand, letting the warm glow guide their steps. The shifting breeze carried hints of colder air, reminding them that their careful preparations were both necessary and wise. Many paused at the well, checking the newly reinforced cover. They tugged the rope gently, tested the hinges, and listened for any movement. The cover held firm. Even the smallest confirmation brought comfort, easing the mind like a soft breath released after a long day. They knew the well would stay clean through the night. Inside the homes, families arranged their stored water neatly. Clay jars stood in rows along cool walls, their cloth covers tied securely. The organization wasn't about perfection. It was about creating a sense of calm readiness. Each jar represented a step towards safety, a quiet act of responsibility granted through the ability and guidance provided to them. A gentle reminder for you: allow your thoughts to drift as they will, just as water drifts gently in its container. There is no right or wrong way to listen to this moment. Some villagers prepared warm broth using the freshly boiled water, letting the rising steam fill their homes with comfort. The soft bubbles created a soothing sound, echoing quietly against the earthen walls. This warmth strengthened the body and reassured the family as night approached. Water for animals was refreshed too. Villagers poured clean water into troughs inside the barns where the cold couldn't reach as easily. The animals responded with soft snorts or gentle steps, as though sensing the care being given. Ensuring their water wouldn't freeze overnight was as important as preparing for the people inside the homes. Near the hearths, families placed a few extra jars of water, close enough to stay warm but far enough from the fire to remain safe. The slight warmth kept the jars from becoming too cold, making them easier to use when the temperature dropped sharply. As lanterns glowed brighter, the village paths grew faintly illuminated, creating small islands of golden light in the growing darkness. People walking home from the well could see others through these pockets of warmth, each carrying their own sense of preparedness. Another soft anchor for your drifting attention. Imagine the quiet hum of a village settling into night, the slow steps, the gentle rustle of cloth covers on water jars. Let the softness pull you deeper into rest. Villagers often spent a moment in silent reflection, appreciating the day's work. Clean water stored for cooking, drinking, and caring for animals meant fewer worries tomorrow. Their efforts, guided by patience and gratitude, formed a quiet shield against whatever the night might bring. Inside the homes, families spoke in low voices, mentioning the jars placed behind doors, beside shelves, and tucked under tables. These small reserves offered a feeling of abundance, even if the total amount wasn't large. It was the readiness, not the quantity, that soothed their hearts. Some villagers used the last minutes of daylight to check their gutters and rain collectors again, clearing any debris that might have fallen since morning. They knew that a few moments of effort now could save a great deal of trouble later. The wind rustling through the branches signaled that rain or snow might arrive soon. As nighttime settled in full, the homes felt more complete. Every jar held purpose. Every barrel stood ready. Families gathered near the hearth, sipping warm drinks or finishing evening chores with a peaceful rhythm. Clean water, safely stored, brought them reassurance without the need for words. The village grew quiet, wrapped in a soft darkness broken only by flickering lanterns and the distant sound of animals settling into sleep. Inside, people prepared their bedding, knowing they could rest comfortably with the certainty that tomorrow's water was already accounted for. And in that gentle stillness, the villagers allowed themselves to drift into sleep, trusting that their thoughtful preparations, made with steady hands and sincere hearts, would carry them safely through the night. The water jars stood silently in the shadows, simple but essential companions to the village, ready for whatever the coming dawn would bring. When the air grew colder and the days shortened, villagers knew that illness often slipped into the season as quietly as evening mist. Preparing for it was never dramatic. It was a gentle routine woven into daily life, shaped by care, experience, and gratitude for the blessings that allowed them to stay healthy. Villagers understood that their bodies needed warmth, nourishment, and rest. Simple things, but powerful when tended with sincerity. The morning began with mothers and grandmothers checking their herb bundles. Mint for easing breath, chamomile for calming the body, time for adding warmth to food. These herbs weren't treated as magic. They were simply part of the natural remedies allowed by the creator of the plants themselves. They sorted the leaves, removed anything too brittle, and tied fresh bundles to hang near the hearth. Fathers focused on the hearth fire, ensuring it would burn steadily throughout the day. Warmth was seen as protection, especially for children and elders. They added logs with care, adjusting them so the fire gave even heat. The crackling sound became a quiet promise that the home would remain a refuge against chills and dampness. A gentle reminder for you: let your breath slow, just like the villagers slowed their pace during colder seasons. There is no rush here, only gentle rhythm. Families prepared simple stews with hearty ingredients, root vegetables, grains, and dried beans stored from earlier months. These meals provided strength and warmth, supporting the body through long nights. As the pot simmered, the scent filled the home, comforting everyone who passed through the doorway. To keep the air inside fresh, villagers opened their shutters for a short moment each morning. Even in the cold, allowing a bit of crisp air to circulate helped clear out lingering smoke or dampness. The chill that entered was brief, followed by the returning warmth of the hearth that wrapped the home once more. Children were taught to wash their hands and faces with clean, warmed water. It wasn't a formal rule, just a simple habit passed down through observation. Keeping clean helped prevent minor sickness, especially during crowded winter days when families stayed indoors more often. Women often stitched warmer clothing during the season. They mended worn sleeves, reinforced frayed hems, and added extra layers to children's tunics. These small acts protected the body from cold winds that could weaken even the strongest adults. The quiet rhythm of sewing threads created a soft harmony with the crackling hearth. Another gentle anchor for your drifting thoughts. Imagine the comforting feel of warm cloth in your hands, the soft glow of firelight nearby, the steady sense of preparation. Let the warmth settle deeper within you. In some homes, pottery jars filled with nourishing broth were warmed slowly throughout the day. Families offered small cups of it to anyone who seemed tired or chilled. The warm broth soothed the body, providing hydration and comfort when appetites were small. Villagers also checked their bedding, shaking out straw mattresses and adding fresh layers where needed. Cold nights could make the body stiff and vulnerable, so ensuring warm, clean bedding became an essential part of caring for oneself and the family. Even the smallest extra blanket helped preserve heat through the darkest hours. In the barns, farmers took a moment to observe their animals. Healthy animals kept the village strong, providing milk, eggs, and wool, support that helped prevent hunger and fatigue during difficult seasons. Any sign of weakness in the animals was addressed early through extra feed or better shelter. As the day grew quieter, many households warmed small stones near the hearth to place at the foot of beds. These stones held their heat long into the night, helping children and elders stay warm. The slow spread of warmth beneath the blankets created a cocoon-like feeling that eased the body into rest. Villagers also prepared small cloth bags filled with warmed herbs. When placed near the chest or feet, these bags released gentle scents that encouraged relaxation. The aroma filled the room softly, creating an atmosphere where rest came naturally. By late afternoon, families had created a circle of protection around themselves. Warm fires, steady meals, clean air, and soft bedding. These simple layers of care formed a shield against seasonal illness, not through fear, but through quiet wisdom carried in every household. As evening approached and the hearth glow deepened, the entire village seemed to move more slowly. People spoke in soft tones, mindful of the long night ahead. Their steady preparations allowed them to face the season with peace, knowing they had taken steps to safeguard their health with the means provided to them. As the light dimmed into the soft colors of evening, villagers shifted into their gentlest routines. This was the time for final checks, small, quiet actions that carried great meaning during the cold seasons. They walked through their homes slowly, feeling the warmth of the hearth meet the chilly air that pressed against the walls outside, grateful for the protection they had prepared throughout the day. Women placed covered bowls near the fire, letting herbs steep quietly in heated water. The rising steam carried calming scents through the room, settling into corners and drifting between woven blankets. These warm herbal waters weren't elaborate remedies. They were simple comforts, meant to soothe throats irritated by the cold and ease breathing during long nights. Men ensured that the last logs for the evening were placed near the hearth. They chose wood that would burn slowly, offering steady warmth so the family wouldn't wake shivering. The quiet thump of logs against the ground blended softly with the fire's crackling, creating a gentle rhythm that wrapped the home in reassurance. A soft reminder for you: breathe steadily, letting each inhale feel like warmth from the hearth, and each exhale like tension melting away. You are safe in the calm of this moment. Children prepared their sleeping spots with care. Straw bedding was fluffed, extra cloth layers placed near their feet, and small warm stones set aside to slip under blankets later. These routines weren't chores. They were rituals that gave them a sense of comfort and participation. Even in their small hands, preparation held importance. Some families prepared a tiny pot of broth to sip before sleep. The warmth eased tired muscles and provided gentle nourishment that supported the body during cold nights. Even the act of holding a warm bowl brought comfort, grounding the mind and relaxing the chest. In homes where someone had already shown early signs of mild discomfort, villagers moved with even quieter intention. A cloth warmed near the fire was placed gently on a forehead. A cup of warm water with herbs was offered in slow sips. The atmosphere remained calm, free from fear, focused only on comforting the person through patience and steady care. Another gentle anchor for your drifting thoughts. Let the softness of these scenes guide you. You're not meant to follow every word strictly, just float with the warmth and quiet. As the night deepened, families checked the windows and door coverings to ensure drafts stayed outside. They adjusted woven mats, pressed cloths into any small gaps, and reinforced shutters with gentle hands. Every small action added one more layer of protection, making the home feel like a cocoon against the winter air. Villagers took time to warm their hands near the fire before settling into bed. The warmth softened their joints and eased the stiffness brought on by cold days. A moment spent simply feeling the glow of the hearth helped their bodies relax, preparing them for restful sleep. In quiet corners of the home, jars of herbs, dried roots, and clean cloths were arranged neatly, ready for use during the night if anyone stirred or felt unwell. This organization reduced worry and allowed the night to remain peaceful even if someone needed gentle care. Some families whispered short reflections of gratitude for the warmth, the food, the blankets, and the ability to prepare. These moments were humble acknowledgments that their efforts worked hand in hand with the provisions granted to them, creating safety through both action and reliance on the one who allowed their resources to exist. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the house, but inside the rooms glowed with calm. The hearth softened the darkness, its light flickering across the walls like silent reassurance. The air felt still, steady, and protective. As families finally lay down, wrapped in layers of warmth, the preparations completed throughout the day settled into a gentle silence. The homes breathed slowly with the people inside them, holding the warmth that would support their health through the long night. And so the village drifted together into rest, surrounded by firelight, warmed by careful hands, and comforted by the quiet certainty that they had done everything possible to stay well through the cold season, trusting the rest to the guidance of the Almighty who sustained them. When the weather turned unpredictable, one of the village's quietest but most essential tasks was protecting food from spoiling. Food was survival, small meals stretched over long nights, nourishment when winds grew sharp, strength for families during seasons when the fields lay bare. Safeguarding it wasn't a loud or urgent effort. It was a gentle, deliberate ritual guided by experience and gratitude for the provisions the Almighty had allowed them to gather. The day often began with a slow walk into the storage areas. Villagers stepped into the cool shadows of their pantries or cellars, listening to the soft creak of wooden shelves. They checked each container with patient eyes. Wooden bins filled with grain, clay pots sealed with cloth and wax, baskets of dried fruits stacked neatly. Nothing was touched in haste. Families examined their grain supplies first. Grain was precious, and keeping it dry and pest-free was vital. They lifted lids, pressed their fingers lightly into the grain, and listened for the flowing sound that meant it remained loose and unspoiled. If the grain clumped or felt damp, they quickly laid it out near the hearth to dry. A gentle reminder for you: let your breath slow down, just as the villagers slowed their movements to protect what sustained them. Allow the calm to settle deeper into your body. Women checked the vegetables stored from earlier months. Potatoes, carrots, and turnips were inspected for soft spots. Any piece showing early signs of decay was removed before it could affect the others. These simple decisions prevented larger losses later on. Each vegetable was a gift, handled with respect and careful hands. In one corner of the home, dried food hung from the beams. Strings of onions, garlic, and dried herbs swayed gently whenever the door opened. Families tested the knots holding these strings, making sure nothing was loose enough to fall or be reached by small animals searching for warmth and food. Some villagers stored dried meat or fish in baskets hung from a ceiling. The height kept them away from moisture and pests. They pressed the dried pieces gently between their fingers, ensuring the texture remained firm and safe. Any sign of dampness was addressed quickly by placing the basket nearer to the hearth for a few hours. Another soft anchor for your drifting mind. Allow yourself to drift as if you're standing in a quiet pantry, surrounded by the earthy scents of grains, wood, and dried herbs. You don't need to picture everything. Just rest in the peaceful feeling. The clay jars containing dried beans and peas were checked next. People gently shook them, listening for the smooth rattle inside. A clear, steady sound meant the beans remained dry. A muffled or heavy noise signaled that moisture had seeped in, and those jars were opened immediately to be dried or used in meals before they spoiled further. Villagers also inspected their root cellars, where cooler temperatures slowed spoilage. They ensured the vents were clear and the air inside remained breathable. If condensation collected on the walls, they wiped it away with cloths, preventing mold from forming in hidden corners. In some homes, baskets of apples or preserved fruits were kept on high shelves. Families checked them by touch and scent, removing any pieces that smelled sour or looked discolored. These early interventions protected the rest of the food supply, a small but important effort to ensure the family had enough for the days ahead. Children participated as well, tasked with checking the simple traps set near the storage rooms. A single mouse could ruin weeks of saved food. The children's quiet footsteps and careful eyes helped keep the storage spaces clean and safe, teaching them responsibility through gentle action. As the sun climbed higher, villagers gathered in small groups to exchange tips or trade preserved foods that would last longer. Someone with extra dried herbs might offer them in exchange for a sack of grain. Another might trade preserved fruits for a handful of dried fish. These exchanges strengthened the villagers' resilience, turning individual efforts into shared security. By midday, the families had completed most of their checks. The food stored within their homes now felt protected, watched over carefully, preserved with skill, and valued as a blessing. This sense of readiness didn't remove the challenges ahead, but it eased the mind, offering calm even when the weather outside grew uncertain. And as the day moved toward afternoon, the village continued their quiet work with steady hearts, knowing that every act of preservation supported not just one home, but the entire community. As the afternoon deepened and shadows stretched across storage rooms, villagers began their second sweep of the day, gentle, careful, and full of intention. These final checks were meant to catch anything the morning light might have missed. Food preservation wasn't a one-time task. It was a quiet, ongoing rhythm that shaped their security during uncertain weather. Families returned to their shelves and bins with lanterns in hand. The warm light illuminated each grain jar, each bundle of dried herbs, each carefully sealed pot. They touched lids to ensure they held firm, feeling for even the slightest looseness. A lid that lifted too easily was tied with cloth or sealed with wax, strengthening it for the nights ahead. In many homes, the soft sound of grains shifting echoed through the air as villagers poured small amounts from one container to another. This simple act helped them check for pests and ensured everything remained dry. When grains flowed smoothly, like sand slipping through fingers, families felt reassured. A gentle reminder for you now: imagine the soft motion of hands sorting through grains, steady and unhurried. Allow that slow pace to settle into your breathing, guiding you deeper into rest. Some villagers brought down small trays of salted or preserved foods hanging near the ceiling. They inspected the salt crust, making sure it remained dry and intact. If the salt had absorbed moisture, they replaced or added more. The preserved food, whether fish or meat, needed the dry salt to remain safe through harsh weather. Children were given the small but important role of checking the baskets along the upper shelves. Their height made them perfect for spotting frayed ropes or loose knots holding dried produce. They called softly to their parents if something needed fixing, their voices blending with the quiet rustle of straw and baskets. In root cellars, adults ran their hands along the cool walls, checking for signs of dampness. If a section felt too wet, they adjusted the airflow by opening or closing vents. Circulation was essential. Stagnant air meant mold, and mold meant loss. Every adjustment they made felt like brushing away future trouble. Another gentle anchor for your drifting thoughts. Picture a calm, cool cellar, lit by a single lantern, its light soft and steady. Let that sense of stillness settle around you. Families also prepared small cloths soaked in warm, lightly scented water to wipe the surfaces of storage shelves. Keeping the shelves clean reduced the chance of spoilage and made the space feel cared for. The scent of herbs mixed with the earthy smell of dried produce, creating a calming atmosphere that wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Women checked their jars of dried berries and fruits, shaking them lightly to listen for any dampness inside. If the sound wasn't crisp enough, they poured the contents onto cloths and let them dry near the hearth before returning them to storage. The warmth of the fire made the drying process gentle and safe. Outside, men reinforced storage sheds or small outdoor cellars. They secured wooden planks, pressed stones against the base of walls, and sealed gaps with mud and straw. The shifting wind carried the scent of distant weather, reminding them that these simple structures held much of the villagers' winter survival within them. As the sky darkened, villagers sealed their grain jars one last time. Some used thin layers of wax around the edges. Others tied extra cloths for added protection. With each seal, they felt a layer of tension ease from their minds. Food that was protected today would bring comfort tomorrow. Back inside the homes, families stacked their sealed jars neatly, placing the heaviest ones at the bottom and the most frequently used ones within easy reach. This thoughtful arrangement prevented accidents and made it easier to prepare meals even on the coldest nights. The lantern light glowed warmly over the final rows of food, casting soft shadows across the baskets and pots. Parents guided their children's hands as they placed the last dried herbs onto the shelves, teaching them the importance of not wasting what the land had provided. As nighttime settled over the village, the hum of preparation quieted into stillness. The stored food, carefully dried, sealed, inspected, and protected, now rested safely for the nights ahead. Families stepped back with calm hearts, knowing they had guarded their nourishment with sincerity and effort. And in the gentle silence of their homes, with the sound of the wind brushing outside, villagers felt the steady reassurance of their work. The preserved food stood as a quiet promise of stability, supporting them through whatever weather awaited beyond the darkened sky. When the final preparations were done, the home strengthened, the food stored, the water secured, the animals sheltered, the village entered its quietest phase of all, waiting. This waiting was not filled with fear or nervous energy. Instead, it carried a gentle calm, as if the entire community breathed in unison, trusting that their careful work and the guidance granted to them would carry them through whatever weather approached. As evening settled, families moved more slowly. The tasks that had filled the day softened into quiet gestures, placing a final log near the hearth, smoothing blankets over children's beds, closing shutters with steady hands. These motions felt like the closing line of a familiar song, one sung every year when the air shifted and the nights grew deeper. In each home, the atmosphere grew still. People sat close to the hearth, letting its warmth seep into their bones. They watched the flames dance silently, their thoughts drifting with the soft flicker of light. The fire's glow reflected off clay jars, wooden bowls, and woven baskets, each one a small testament to the work completed earlier. A gentle reminder for you now: let your heartbeat follow the calm rhythm of this scene, slow, steady, peaceful. You don't need to hold on to every detail. Just let the warmth flow through your imagination like a quiet stream. Outside, the wind began to rise in soft waves, brushing against the homes. But instead of fear, villagers felt reassurance. They had tightened the beams, reinforced the roofs, and sealed the doors. Every gust simply confirmed that the work had been worthwhile. The homes stood firm, a reflection of effort guided by patience. As night crept across the village, the sounds changed. Footsteps became softer. Conversations turned into murmurs. The animals settled into their bedding, leaving the barns filled with the gentle rhythm of breathing creatures. Even the trees swayed more slowly, their branches tapping lightly against each other like a quiet lullaby. Inside the homes, mothers prepared warm drinks, simple mixtures of herbs, warm water, and a touch of sweetness when available. These drinks helped soothe the body and prepared everyone for the long night ahead. The rising steam curled in the air, carrying a scent that felt like comfort itself. Children gathered closer to their parents, drawn by the calming glow of the hearth. They listened to the wind outside with the kind of curiosity that came from feeling protected. Their eyes grew heavy, lulled by the warmth, the soft voices around them, and the knowledge that everything that could be done had already been done. Another soft anchor for your drifting thoughts. Imagine your body settling into the same stillness as those children, wrapped in warmth, held by quiet, drifting gently. As the hours passed, families reflected on the day's efforts, not with pride, but with a quiet satisfaction. They had worked as one, home by home, person by person, supporting each other, preparing calmly for the night. They trusted that these efforts, combined with the guidance and mercy provided to them, would help them face whatever came next. Villagers often took a final look outside before fully settling in. They opened the door just a crack, letting a thin sliver of cold air touch their faces. The darkness lay thick over the village, but instead of being intimidating, it felt serene. Lanterns glowed softly through windows, like warm stars scattered across the ground. Inside once more, the door closed gently. Families gathered around the hearth for the last time before sleep. The popping of the firewood, the soft shifting of blankets, and the slow exhaling of tired bodies formed a peaceful soundtrack that wrapped each home in comfort. In these early moments of night, the village felt united in stillness. Nothing more needed to be prepared. Nothing more needed to be checked. They had created a circle of warmth and safety around their homes, and all that remained was to rest within it. As the night deepened, villagers leaned back against wooden walls or rested on straw-filled bedding, letting their bodies grow heavy with the promise of rest. The quiet waiting wasn't a burden. It was a gentle reminder that not every challenge required action. Sometimes, it simply required calm patience and the steady trust that their efforts would hold. As the village slipped deeper into the night, the wind outside grew stronger, brushing against rooftops with a long, steady sigh. But inside each home, the fire's glow pushed back the darkness, creating pockets of warmth where families could rest. The quiet contrast between the world outside and the world within only made the hearth feel more comforting. Some villagers lay awake for a few moments longer, listening closely, not out of worry, but out of habit, letting the sounds of the wind, the shifting branches, and the occasional creak of wood guide their final thoughts. These familiar noises reminded them of countless nights before, nights they had weathered with the same steady patience that shaped their days. The fire continued to crackle softly, sending tiny sparks of light dancing across the room. Families breathed slowly, matching their inhales to the rhythm of the flame. That slow, flickering pulse seemed to settle into their bodies, calming the last of their tension and guiding them gently towards sleep. A gentle reminder for you, the listener, you can let go a little more. Let your breath soften, let your shoulders sink, let the warmth of this scene wrap around you like a quiet blanket. As time passed, the village grew still. Even the animals in the barns settled deeper into their nests, offering only the occasional sleepy sigh. The night was no longer something to brace against, only something to pass through peacefully, guided by the warmth and preparation of the day. In homes across the village, elders whispered soft words of reassurance to the young. They spoke about how the seasons had always changed, how storms had always come and gone, and how preparation made each challenge softer. These words weren't meant to teach fear, but to pass down the calm wisdom of living closely with nature. Some families kept a single lantern glowing low, placed near the hearth to guide anyone who might wake in the night. The soft golden halo illuminated clay jars, baskets, and wooden stools, turning everyday objects into gentle silhouettes that added to the feeling of safety. Another soft anchor for your drifting thoughts. Imagine that dim lantern glow, steady and warm, guiding you gently through the quiet of the night. As midnight passed, the homes became as still as the thick blankets wrapped around the sleeping families. Every worry, every effort, every task from the day slowly melted into silence. What remained was trust, trust in their hands, trust in their neighbors, and trust in the guidance and mercy of the Almighty who allowed their preparations to flourish. The wind outside began to soften, its earlier intensity fading into a slow, whispering breeze. The storm that had seemed so near was now only a distant murmur, held back by sturdy walls, sealed windows, and the warmth of countless small acts done with care. Inside each home, the fire lowered to a gentle ember glow, casting a soft red light over sleeping faces. It was enough to warm the air, enough to remind the villagers that even in the darkest hours, comfort remained close. And as the final hours of night settled in, the entire village rested without fear. They had built their safety piece by piece, through kindness, preparation, cooperation, and trust. All that remained was the gentle waiting, the peaceful drifting into sleep, knowing they had done all they could. In this quiet reflection, imagine yourself resting with the same steady calm as the villagers, wrapped in warmth, surrounded by softness, supported by simple, sincere efforts that carry you through the night. Thank you for listening to this story. May its quiet rhythm bring you peace, may its warmth follow you into rest, and may your night be gentle and full of ease.